You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS, together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello and welcome. It's Friday. Finally getting to that day of the week where we can relax and celebrate and enjoy the show. And more importantly, let everything that we've done through the week, work-wise, all of that, we can leave it behind and enjoy ourselves together tonight. If you're in the chat, hello and welcome. Thank you for being here live. If you're watching it back, thank you. Listening back, thank you. And please, if you are watching or listening back, why not try and join one of our live shows, because you get to chat to us and ask questions as well. And please hit that like button if you haven't already. I'm here with Mr. Hooley. Fantastic to see you. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. I love how enthused you are about it being Friday, and the facial expressions are definitely on the go as well.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we had a comment in after last week's show that my facial expressions were second to none, I think. No, I can't remember what the
art form in themselves. That's
an art form, yeah. So that's the first time I've had a positive comment about my facial expressions. But yes, they are definitely happy today being Friday, and it's just nice to get to Friday and think about the weekend is just there for us now and relaxing. Hopefully that means some writing for you guys and all that good stuff. Brandon, hello to you in the chat. Calm down, Agate. Thank you. No, I shouldn't calm down. You should all be happier. We got Anna in the chat. We got Camellia and Brandon, of course. Dan's there. Lucia, hello to you all. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah, Chris, are you doing well?
Yeah, it's been an interesting week. It's been, obviously, we had, is it Mental Health Day,
Yep.
something or other? I can't get it out. I don't know what it is, but something about mental health midway through the week. And that was nice. And obviously, this is always a good thing to look forward to. And, you know, people getting together in a community. Apparently, that is one of the things that helps if you're suffering with mental health, is to get involved in a community and speak to people. So, perfect opportunity.
Yeah. We can certainly vouch for that, both of ourselves, Chris. We've both been through our own battles of mental health, and we've seen professionals about that and all sorts over the past few years. No doubt that's been contributed because of lockdown and all that stuff that happened. And this show was blossomed right at the start of lockdown. And for that reason, there was a lot of people getting in touch with us that really looked forward to this show, because there was something to focus on and something to enjoy and have that community aspect about it. And we both said to each other in the after shows and offline as well that we've really kind of embraced this and relied on it ourselves too. So having that community and togetherness has really helped all of us, in a sense, to kind of feel that togetherness and enjoyment and just have an outlet of a bit of fun, listening to people's stories, and it's worked really well for everybody. So yeah, I'm very glad the show's here, and I'm sure you guys are as well. Halo says happy Friday the 13th. Yes, it is. Unlucky for some, however, lucky for some others. I was born on Friday the 13th, and that explains a lot, I'm sure. It's not just happy Friday the 13th, it's also October, and we have a Halloween party show coming up, guys. We haven't done a party show for quite some time, and that Halloween show will feature a tarot reading from Mr. Hooley right there. He says he's got the skills, so we're looking to see if he has.
I didn't say that, mate. I said I've been practicing.
Anya Pavil, who's one of our long-term supporters and one of our previous guests, she's been on many shows. She's going to do a live spell for us in the world of witchcraft. And it's going to help with writer's block, so that'll be great to see. We'll also be running part of our panel show where people will do stupid impressions and all that sort of stuff as well. And it's going to be an interesting show. Halo says Halloween. What's that word? Go on. I'll get it right.
Debauchery.
Yeah. And Lucia says Friday the 13th is not scary in Italy. It's not scary. considered unlucky, maybe.
I was having a look back yesterday, actually, at the panel shows, and they are the best shows, I think. They're so much fun. Like, I was laughing along at them, even though I was in them, because obviously it's been a long time and I couldn't remember them. But yeah, brilliant shows, them.
They're a lot of fun. They're quite tricky to set up, but it's worth doing. And if you're ever interested in joining the panel show, it's basically like a quiz show, and you go through rounds of writing skills and questions and impressions. Linda says the giraffe. Yeah, we all remember that one, and the dolphin. But if you want to put a team together at any stage to face the WCCS team, which Chris Hooley is the captain of, just email us or drop us a message to say you're interested, and we'll set that up. It's a really good laugh. It's not really showcasing your writing, but it's writers getting together and having a good time. And that's what's important. The panel show, if you haven't seen it, they're on YouTube, on our channel. Go and check them out. You'll see writers like you've never seen them before. Cool. Are you ready for tonight's guest, Chris?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to tonight's guest. We've had so many people on that have won the Crime Writers Association Awards, which I think they should be a separate segment on their own on the YouTube channel. But yeah, we're blessed with guests as always, and tonight's guest is no different.
Before we do jump into that, I had one more thing to talk about, and we did some writing news last week, so I want to try and carry that on. And this is a little story I found online. Interested to know what people who are watching this, what their thoughts are, and what your thoughts are, Chris. So Atonement author Ian McEwan has told aspiring authors and young authors not to be afraid of offending readers with their writing amid the rise of use of sensitivity readers to comb through their books to remove sensitive material. In other words, he said that younger generations would only limit their ability to express themselves by treading lightly in how they write, and that's writers should be able to express themselves freely without the fear of reprisal. After classics by the likes of Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming were given the sensitivity treatment earlier this year. What do you think about
that? First, I'm going to address the tip that you gave us last week, and that was really good, by the way, because you said that Spotify are now offering 15 hours of audiobooks, and I actually listened to 2 this week, so that was a nice little tip that I didn't know about, so thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna have to wear my heart on my sleeve, and I never worry about that when I'm writing, so I guess I agree with him to some extent.
It's an interesting one. I don't want to bring this into a massive conversation right now because we've got guests to bring on. But if you were in the chat and you've thought about this while you're writing, please let us know and what you kind of did to kind of combat that issue, and if you did anything differently because of it.
I think definitely in your first draft, you should write whatever you want, really, and then maybe go to sensitivity readers afterwards, especially if you're dealing with certain topics that you think might require a sensitivity reader. But in terms of first draft, I think you should just go for it.
Go for it, yeah. Get it on the paper. Okay, right. Moving on to tonight's guest. Tonight's guest on the Writing Community Chat Show is an author whose literary talent has taken us on a thrilling journey through the enchanting streets of Renaissance Florence. D.V. Bishop, the mastermind behind the I've forgotten what he told it. The Cesare Aldo mysteries. I've messed that right up. Published by Pan Macmillan. I did get to chat to this author at Harrogate for the Pan Macmillan tent. This was a fantastic interview. He's not only received critical acclaim, but has also captured the hearts of countless readers with his vivid storytelling. With a background as award-winning screenwriter and TV dramatist, his ability to weave historical intrigue and crime fiction into mesmerizing narrative is truly commendable. We're about to delve into the world of his novels and the allure of the Renaissance Florence and the many accolades that have graced his remarkable career. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome D.V. David Bishop. Hello. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yes.
Amazing. It's so good to see you again, this time virtually. It was great to chat to you at Harrogate. How have things been since?
Busy, but good. Yeah, no, it's good. Like you, I'm very happy it's Friday, frankly. Unfortunately, unlike you, I'm having a dry month, so I'm not drinking alcohol this month, which is making October unfeasibly long. Normally, if we have a dry month in the household, we just pick February on the basis it's the shortest month.
That's wise, yeah.
If you're going to have a dry month, always go for February. Although it's 29 days next year. Next year's a leap year, so that wouldn't help you quite so much. But
Yeah.
otherwise, no. Thank goodness it's the weekend. Bring it on, is what I say.
Yeah. I mean, is that been a busy week for you in terms of writing?
Not so much. So I teach 4 days a week. So I run the creative writing program at Edinburgh Napier University, the face-to-face program, and we also have an online version of the program. And our focus is on popular genre fiction. So crime, horror, science fiction, fantasy, romance, historical, writing for young adult readers as well. And we also do a module. I run a module in writing for comics, graphic novels, and web comics. Which is not something that gets taught anywhere, basically. And if it is, it's always aimed at writer artists. And we do a bit of screenwriting as well. So we're sort of, that takes a lot of time, unsurprisingly. So mostly I'm writing, I work 4 days a week for the university. So mostly I'm writing Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So when I say, yay, it's Friday, it means tomorrow I can start writing again.
Yeah, that's a busy time. But also, I feel like working with students in that creative aspect can really kind of broaden your mind as a writer as well. And now we're into October. Is there kind of a special focus on the horror side of things, or is that always, do you always kind of accommodate all of the genres that you work with?
I mean, we try and hit all the main commercial genres, but I have deliberately arranged the schedule this year. So Horror Week is the week leading up to October 31st, because I did have it in the schedule. I thought, no, you don't do horror on the 3rd of November. Who does horror on the 3rd of November? That's so we are doing horror in Halloween week in the run up to it. We get a lot of American students come in our program, and they love Halloween. But we also make them come to class on Thanksgiving towards the end of November, which they always grumble about because they're used to having that Thursday off. But we're like, no, sorry, you're in Britain now. Work.
Yeah. I mean, Halloween is notoriously more popular and active in America, and we've got some American audience to watch the show, so they can inform us about that. But in the UK, it's kind of catching up very slowly. But I do think it's something that we should embrace more and then try and take more passion in, because I think it's a really fun, creative thing. But yeah, that's coming up very soon. Whereabouts in the world are you coming from right now?
So I live in a small town, ironically called Bigger. It's AR, not ER, which is about 25, 30 miles southwest of Edinburgh and about 40 miles southeast of Glasgow. So we're like the bottom of a triangle of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and we're down at the bottom of that. So
yeah. So I assume after Harrogate, you ventured up to bloody Scotland?
Yes, I was at bloody Scotland. I wasn't on a panel this year. I was longlisted for the McIlvenney Prize, which was lovely, but I didn't get shortlisted. And then I was watching everybody's live videos from, because if you're shortlisted for the McIlvenney, you have to do this torchlit parade from the Church of the Holy Rood, it's its actual name. And then you go down the cobbled streets right down to the Albert Halls, which is the big hall in Stirling. And it was tipping down. And they were all absolutely drenched. And because a friend of mine, Kate Foster, who won the debut prize this year, she was telling me, we had an event on Wednesday, she was telling me that she spent the whole day getting her hair done. She had brilliant hair. It was like the best her hair had ever looked. And then she turned up to do the torchlit parade because she was up for the debut prize. And she's trying to carry an umbrella and her lit torch. I said, no, you can't have those two things. One could set fire to the other. So she had to just walk down. And she said by the time she got down to the Albert Hall, she just like, this very time-consuming hairstyle was just like, and then she won. Had to go up on stage like that. So,
oh no.
Yes. So
well,
the one time I thought, okay, I don't mind not being shortlisted because I'd absolutely be drenched through at this point.
Yeah,
so.
I'm sure your hair would be okay though.
Yeah, my hair would be fine. I would not have a hair problem. That would not be an issue for me. I haven't had a hair problem for about 20 years. So.
I did actually see pictures of it, and yeah, you're right. It was absolutely. I think the roads were kind of running with water. Yeah, it was pretty pretty bad. Cool. So we're going to go straight into part one of the show, which is the road to writing, which we get to hear about your story and your kind of journey into writing. I'm going to play a little video, and hopefully we'll get to have some good stories about that and take some tips and advice to the people watching that are new into the writing journey. It's surprising how many people give tips without even realizing it when they talk about their journey. So the road to writing coming right up. So, David, how did you step into the writing world from the very beginning? Was there some sort of inspiration or inspirational person that kind of led you in that direction? Or was it kind of something you always wanted to do?
I think it was something I always wanted to do. I, like a lot of writers, I was a really voracious reader. I read everything I could lay my hands on. As a notorious example, well, we used to have a mobile library. I grew up in New Zealand, hence the accent. And we didn't have a library near to us, but there was a mobile library van that used to come around and stop at the shopping centre. So I would bike up the hill to get to the shopping centre. But there was a strict limit on how many books you could get out each week from the mobile library. So I think it was like a 2 or 3 book limit a week, which really frustrated me because I would get through the books by 3 days later, and I'm like, I've got to wait till Friday. So there was one occasion I was desperate to get hold of The Hobbit. I'd never read The Hobbit, and I think I must have been about 10 at the time. So I decided I would walk to the nearest library that had a copy of The Hobbit in stock, which was about 6 miles away. So I walked for, I don't know, 2.5 hours to get to this library to check out the copy of The Hobbit, by which point it was pitch dark. I didn't have any money. All I had was my library card at the age of 10 or 11, having walked 6 miles across town in New Zealand. So then I had to, my dad used to be a car mechanic at a service station down the road, petrol station. So I walked down there. He wasn't there, but then they would phone up my home and get somebody to come and collect me because I couldn't get home again. And there was no bus service to get there. So yeah, I've been known to go a long way to get hold of a book or something I want to read. And I started, I started with fan fiction. So I used to write fan fiction of everything I read. I would go, oh, brilliant, I'd love to write a story like this. So I used to write Famous Five fan fiction because I love Famous Five. Mostly, I think, just because they're constantly getting kidnapped and taken away, which somehow, the fantasy world of I could have a better life if somebody would just kidnap me and take me away. I'm not sure that's really how it works in most situations. Anyway. And then I used to write James Bond 003.5, where it was like, junior James Bond going out and fighting crime and solving adventures. Quite why I was reading James Bond when I was 11, I don't know, because the Ian Fleming books, not really for 11-year-olds. But nonetheless, I just let that wash over me. And then I was writing Doctor Who fan fiction and all sorts. So yeah, I started off and I just read everything. I remember at the high school I went to, I read everything that was meant to be for boys. And then we went co-ed. So then I started reading everything that was for girls. That was sort of weirdly, they kept it in a separate section because they merged 2 libraries together. So yes, I read a lot of doctor and nurse romances at a certain point in my life because it was nothing.
It's really interesting then to learn what your kind of current writing is historical fiction, to come from a background in such a diverse range of genres. Why do you feel like historical fiction was where you were led to, despite all that kind of background you had?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm writing crime fiction, which is set in it has an historical setting. I mean, the history and the setting is intrinsic to the stories I'm telling. But so I used to write for Doctors on BBC One, which is somewhere between a medical drama and a soap opera, effectively. It's got bits of both. And I used to do radio plays for the BBC, and I've written a ton of comics and graphic novels. So Judge Dredd, for people who don't know, is a future lawman, a cop of the future, 122 years in the future. So I used to edit Judge Dredd comics and 2000 AD comics, and I wrote for them as well. And no matter what I was writing for, I would always put a crime and a mystery into the story. So when I was writing for Doctors, which is ostensibly about people in a small suburb of Birmingham having a hard time with their shingles or something, and yet there would always be a threat of death or maiming, or somebody was doing something terrible and they had to find out what it was. And I spent a lot of time writing tie-in books. So I wrote Doctor Who novels, I wrote Judge Dredd novels, I wrote a Nightmare on Elm Street novel, since it's horror month. Basically, Freddy Krueger Tortures the Breakfast Club was this basic setup of my novel.
Nice.
I really enjoyed. And so I wrote all sorts of things. But I always wanted to be writing crime, and yet I was always having to do these other things because that's where the work was. I wrote 2 Warhammer fantasy novels for Games Workshop. And even then, it was Hill Street Blues or The Bill with the occasional elf wandering past in the background, because I just could not help myself. It's always been crimes and mysteries. Those elements of stories have always appealed to me most. And then it's finding the right story, the right place, the right time, and the opportunity. So yes.
David, I've got 2 questions off the back of that. The first one is, what does your T-shirt say? Because I'm trying to read it and you're sort of like moving around.
Oh, sorry. My T-shirt says, Cesare Aldo took no pleasure in killing. And on the back it says, but sometimes it was necessary.
Yeah.
Love it.
Which is the opening sentence of the first Cesare Aldo novel, City of Vengeance. And it's also the closing sentence of the first Cesare Aldo novel, City of Vengeance. And it has a very different vibe when you get to the end of the book than it did at the start.
Just to interrupt you there, Chris, Cesare was what I was trying to say at the start of the show. If anyone would kind of got confused, Cesare.
Also,
and my second question.
You were looking for.
Sorry?
Debauchery is the word you were looking for.
Oh, debauchery, yeah. We both messed that up. The second question that I've got is, can you remember writing your very first novel? So you wrote, obviously, all these fan fiction stories first, but then what was the experience like when you had that idea for an original book for yourself? And can you talk us through that process and maybe give people a couple of tips that may be going through a similar process right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, because everything I did before City of Vengeance was pre-created characters, somebody else's universe, and I was either being paid to play in it or I was just doing it for fun myself. So City of Vengeance was my first It's All Me novel, my first truly original novel. And I had the advantage because I'd already had 20 tie-in novels published in various forms. So I learned a lot, and I'd done a master's in screenwriting as well. So I'd learned a lot about structure, and I'd had a lot of experience in having to write stories to deadlines and all sorts of things. So those are all helpful. But it doesn't stop the fact that when you sit down to write something where you don't have a character given to you and you don't have a universe given to you, you do have to build it all from scratch for yourself. And you have to decide how you're going to tell the story, how you're going to immerse the reader in that world. And because I'm writing historical, but mine is set 485 years in the past. And also it's in Italy, and I don't speak Italian, and I don't read Italian. After 2 years of Duolingo, you think I'd be better, but no, apparently not. So I've had to do a lot. I had to do a ton of research. If you're going to write historical, you have to do your research. But the difficulty that you have is that you can keep researching forever. I mean, I spent 20 years not writing City of Vengeance because I was doing research, which is just mad. It's crazy. It was too much, frankly. And eventually, I thought I had to know everything. And you don't have to know everything about a place or a time or a setting. You need to know enough to be able to write the story. And actually, often it's better, if you can, to do the research after. Find out what you need to know to tell the story that you're telling, and then go and do the research to fill in the gaps. So one of my previous mentors, he would say, in order to get out of his own way, because it's so tempting, you're going, oh, and then they walked around the corner and then they saw this, or he came in and he was wearing, oh my God, what does a cardinal wear? What does a Monsignor wear? What do we call a thing that goes around a nun's head that goes under the chin? I'm like, it's got a name. It's bound to have a name. They've worn it for 1,000 years. It must have a name, for goodness sakes. And then the temptation to go online and start looking. and then just disappear into the rabbit hole of Wikipedia and Google and YouTube, and you're just gone. And then 2 hours later, you're shutting them all down again, and then you go, "Oh, hang on, wasn't I looking for something?" And I've done that so many times, drives me crazy. So I do 2 loads of research now for anything I'm going to write. I try and have a sense of what the story's going to be about and where and when it's set, and then I'll do as much research as I can. And I go through a load of books. So behind me, you can see books, more. They're all double shelved as well. There's like 2 levels of books in there. So that's all the research materials I've accumulated over the years. So I will pick out the books I need for that particular story, and I'll go through and I will basically copy down the key stuff I need to know, the absolute key information, and I'll stick it into a separate document, which I just have next to my desk. So then if I go, oh, hang on, what's happening on this day, or what goes here, or what's next to that? And like the other over here, you can see I've got a giant map of Florence up on the wall, is here. So I can go, now which bridge is that? And how do they get here? So I can just walk over, look at it, and then sit back down without going on the bloody internet and then disappearing and losing 2 hours of getting nowhere. So I do research before I start writing. And then if I'm in the middle of writing and I need something, I will literally I'll put square brackets and then all capitals, research, close square brackets, and keep going. So, they served an amazing meal of, but rather than go off and spend 2 hours looking at my book about what people ate in 1536 on a Wednesday during Lent when there's no meat, then I will do that. I'll do that at the end of the day or when I get to the end of the draft. So that's what I do to stop myself getting sidetracked by research.
Yeah.
Linda
says chronic research can kill a story idea, and that's the angle you're going down. There's a burning question in the back of my mind. We have to track back in the conversation slightly, but you talked about Judge Dredd being 120 odd years
22 years in the future, always.
Do you remember when the first story originated and what that future date would be?
It was 1977, so it was set in the year 2099, which is why it was 122 years in the future, because it's a cool round number.
Yeah, just on the top of my head, I was wondering how close we were to that date. Yeah, cool. So, I mean, research is a very tricky thing, and what people identify is that when you do too much, you confuse the story. But I quite like that tip you had, where we'll get the story out and then insert the facts or the timeline and all that stuff into it. In your editing process, is that kind of how you approached it then? You if you found something that didn't fit, you removed, or if you found things that needed to go in, you just kind of put it into your draft in that sense?
Yeah, so I try and there's a great Hilary Mantel did 5 Reef lectures for the BBC, and I think it's number 4 where she talks about writing historical fiction and how you shouldn't tidy up history just to suit your story. You should respect history. And there's enough gaps in history that you can put your story into it without having to, alter, I don't know, people aren't landing on the moon in 1967 just because it's convenient for you, unless you're doing alt history, which is its own thing. So I try and absolutely respect the timetable of history and stick to the timetable of history, which has caused me real problems at times in some of the books I'm writing. And then it's the stupid things that you discover. Annoyingly sometimes after the fact, like the third book in my series, Ritual of Fire, the original draft, they were eating this tomato stew, and I gave it to one of my friends who beta reads for me before it goes on, and they said, well, I'm loving the book, but you do know they didn't have the tomato for another 4 years. I'm like, wow. Italian cuisine without Italian cooking without a tomato. What were they eating, for God's sakes? There's a lot of vegetable broths and polenta, apparently, and some cheese and wine. So they were fine. But, there's no tomatoes in Italian cooking in Florence in 1538. I'm like, so that turned into just a boring old stew. No more tomatoes.
So David,
I do find it amazing. Sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, linking back to what me and Chris were talking about at the start about sensitivity readers, Obviously, people may get frustrated by a tomato being in a book 4 years early. But what do you do? What's your approach to sensitivity readers in terms of obviously tackling history as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, for a start, I think sensitivity readers is the wrong name for that job. I think authenticity reader is a much better name for it. Sensitivity is, then you get into like, oh, it's all wokey woke sensitive, and then people, and it's just, to me, that inflames people. If you call it an authenticity reader, that's no different from, I'm going to write a book about, I don't know, going to the moon, so therefore I would probably want to talk to some astronauts or some scientists to get the science right. Well, equally, if I'm going to write a book that's going to involve, I don't know, so the first book in the series, City of Vengeance, it's based, there's a murder in the Jewish community at the start of the book. There's only like 100 Jews in Florence at this point in history. But equally, I wanted to make sure that the depiction of Jewish people bore some resemblance to what Jewish people were like at that point in history and actually what they're like today. So I gave the manuscript to one of my friends as a beta reader who is Jewish, and they could go, yeah, no, absolutely. This is a perfectly fair, depiction of Jewish characters. They're not a monolith. They're not all good. They're not all evil. They're not, they're not all Shylock from Merchant of Venice, but nor are they something else. So, yeah, I think your idea that you write your first draft and then go, okay, all right, what was it that I wasn't entirely sure about? Therefore, where would an authenticity reader be helpful for me? And I think that's a perfectly valid way to approach it. But I mean, I think, yeah, you should write the first draft you want to write and then think about, okay, so were there things in this that I weren't sure about? To me, an authenticity reader is no different from doing your research. And if somebody was going to, well, put it this way, when I watch things on TV or films, or I read a book and it's something about an industry I know about, and I just go, oh, that's ridiculous. So I don't know, when I watch, I mean, I love Endeavour, which is like the Young Morse spin-off TV show, but there's an episode where somebody's typing on a typewriter in a newspaper office in the 1960s. Absolutely. But there's not a sheet of carbon paper anywhere. They only type one copy of the story, where you had to type 2 or 3 copies of the story. So you had carbon paper because we didn't have bleeding photocopiers in the 1960s. Well, I was only just born. I wasn't working in newspapers in the 1960s. But nonetheless, so it's just little details like that will throw me out of it. And equally, if I was, I don't know, Jewish and reading a book and I went, no Jew would ever do that. It's ridiculous. Or no, you've got a phrase of Hebrew in here, but you've spelt it wrong, for goodness sakes. I mean,
it is amazing how many people will pull up not mistakes, but indifferences in the story. And I always think, going back to sort of Andy Weir's The Martian, with the amount of accuracy and research that he did to get that story right, because especially when it comes to science, people are so particular about what you say and what you do. So it really depends. I mean, I liked your comment, what you mentioned, alt history as well, that maybe if someone's creating something and they look at it and think, actually, this is really way off the historical facts, that maybe I could just call it alt fiction and go down that route.
Yeah, I did one of the Doctor Who novels I wrote for, I think it was for BBC Books, although it was the worst one I wrote, so don't go looking for it, anybody. I mean, I still take the royalties, that's fine, but it was a terrible book. But it posited the idea that what if the computer had never been invented? What would life be like in, whenever I wrote it, 2003, if there were no computers? And so I ended up, they had to deliberately suppress the creation of the computer. So I ended up, they had Alan Turing was being kept in the Tower of London at one point in the story, I seem to recall. But yeah, so it was like, so that absolutely was, it was alt history. They did a whole series, but the problem with alt history is if there's a big red reset button at the end of it, like at The Simpsons, where Bart and Homer are always going to be the same. Next episode, they never learn. Well, that's a problem. If you do that in novels, it's problematic, because why should we care if you just got a reset button at the end of it? Which is kind of the problem with writing a lot of tie-in fiction. If you write for other people's characters, you have to put them all back the way that you had them at the start. So the readers know nothing's ever actually going to change. Whereas when you write your own story, you can kill anybody you want.
Yeah, which is great. Okay, we're going to move on to the second part of the show, which is when we talk about Ritual of Fire. So we're going to play a little video, And when we come back, hopefully you've got your blurb or your pitch for this book down, and hopefully you can let everybody know all about Ritual of Fire. So What's the Story coming right up. So, David, could you please let us all know what the Ritual of Fire is all about, please?
Absolutely. So Ritual of Fire is the third Cesare Aldo book in the series, but they can all be read as standalones. Cesare Aldo is an investigator for the most feared criminal court in Renaissance Florence. And the book opens with somebody has captured a rich merchant. They've tied them to a gibbet atop a cart. They roll the cart into the biggest, most important square in Florence as dawn breaks, and they set fire to this guy. They burn this rich merchant alive in front of in the main piazza of Florence. And it's 40 years to the day since a man called Savonarola was executed by the same methodology. And Savonarola is notorious in history. He was a monk, and he basically, at the end of the 15th century, he had the whole of the city of Florence was following him. He would give sermons. Half the population of the city would crowd in the cathedral to hear him. He was a true populist leader. And he had everybody terrified of him. They thought that he spoke for God and he could get them excommunicated or have them all burning in hell. They didn't do what he said. But he overreached. He got flung out by the Pope. He got tried and executed. 40 years to the day after he was executed, somebody starts killing rich merchants from Florence, burning them alive in increasingly baroque and outrageous fashions as the book progresses. And Aldo's job is to try and find out who is killing these men, why they are killing them, and to try and stop them from killing anybody else.
Yeah, fantastic story and idea and concept. But with the historical side, as we mentioned before, with the research element, how much research, or have you ever been to Florence, for example? How much research have you gone into getting that kind of scenery right? Because a lot of the reviews of this book mention how the kind of environment really is part of the story, almost like the environment is part of it. I think it said the environment is almost like a character itself. So how do you get that aspect right?
I mean, if you can make the city or the setting like an intrinsic part of the story, like another character, then I think that readers love that. And it's, for me, you really want that reader immersion. So you want the reader to feel like they're beside the character, walking through the streets. So Ritual of Fire is set during a heat wave. So I wanted you to almost like the heat to be shimmering off the page as you're reading the book. And one of the ways to do that, I think, as a writer, is activate all five senses for the reader. So you want characters touching things. So the character feels the texture of the stone under their fingertips. Or if they get beaten up, smashed against the stone wall, then they're feeling the stone against the skin of their face. But I think the sense that's really the most evocative and really transports a reader directly onto the page, and it's one that, because I teach creative writing, and it's one I'm often have to remind students, is smell. Put smells on the page, because when we describe something as writers, often the temptation is we describe what we can hear, we can describe what a character can see, taste sometimes, but they need to be eating something generally. But it's surprising how many writers don't use smell on the page, and it's such a brilliant way to transport a reader directly to a place. So my books, somewhat notoriously, are very pungent. They're very smell based. So there's, they didn't have a sewage system at this point. There's just a channel running down the center of the road where, the human waste and the animal waste is in it. So that, and it's summer. So we've all lived in stepped through a city when it's a heat wave, and, somebody has not made it to the toilet the night before, and you can smell it when in the alleyway. It's like, oh my Lord. Well, like that. But equally, cooking smells and other things like that are just like really transport you to the place. The second book in the series is called The Darker Sin, and that's set largely in a nunnery. It's like a locked room mystery in a nunnery, and they've got these lavender plants in the courtyard which are growing and blossoming. So the book is just endless smells of lavender, And there's a writer friend of mine, a wonderful writer called Leonora Natris, who also writes historical crime fiction. And she says, "Oh yeah, that's the lavender book. Every time I smell lavender, I think of your bloody book." And I'm like, "Oh, sorry." But yeah, smells hugely, really just take you directly there to the place and really bring it alive.
I just, in my mind, instantly popped at the idea of scratch and sniff book covers. Do you remember those? Yeah. How then do you describe a smell and making it be immersive and not kind of overpowering, and not the smell overpowering, but overpowering in terms of reading, being distracting to the reader, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think as creatures, we notice change and we notice difference. So if we walk down the street, we always walk down, then and nothing's changed, then we don't notice. We just go about our journey. I mean, we've all got into a car and done a journey that we've done 1,000 times, and you get out the car and you go, "Oh, hang on, am I here already?" And it's just gone by. You didn't notice everything because it was exactly the same as you're expecting.
Yeah.
So we notice change. So therefore, the easiest way to get to describe a place or a smell, whatever it is to have a character who's new to that location and we see it through their eyes or their senses, or else somebody who's familiar with the location, but then there's a new smell or there's something else that they haven't observed in there before. So if somebody goes into a church and they don't spend all their time in churches, then they would go, "Woof, incense, blimey," which is a particularly pungent smell. It's Ritual of Fire. There's a scene where a character goes into a room where they're storing silks and other fabrics. But of course, you have a problem if you're storing silk is that they get eaten by moths and insects. So they used to have camphor. They would have these urns full of camphor, which they would use and burn it in order to fill the room up with smoke to drive away moths and other things that would destroy their incredibly valuable stock, which is they brought the silk over from China. But I was going, "What does camphor smell like? I've got no bloody idea what camphor smells like." And then you look up online to try and find out, what does camphor smell like? It smells like camphor. Yeah, that's not helpful. That's like saying what was an orange. So I was trying to find a good description of what camphor smells like without having to go and find some camphor to sniff it for a while. So it can be a bit challenging sometimes, but then it's sort of like if you can't find the right word or phrase to describe a smell, then you describe its impact on somebody. So their face curdles at the smell of whatever is distasteful. So we can go, "Oh, okay, that's horrible." So yes.
So have you ever smelt camphor?
Not knowingly.
No.
I can't remember how I described it either. I think I described it as heady, and it makes one character starts coughing because they're overwhelmed by the smell because they're not used to it. That was the best I could come up with because I didn't have time to go off and go investigate camphor.
David, I'm really interested. Obviously, you mentioned about you teaching creative writing, and as somebody who teaches a course on popular fiction, and I'm assuming that you read a lot of popular fiction as well in order to do that. Does that have any impact at all when you sit down to write? Because my experience of studying fiction at university is that it kind of put me off reading and writing for a little bit, because when I sat down to write, I was like, "Oh, I'm doing that thing that's just like this book, or I'm doing this thing that I've already read before." And it kind of took me a while to step away from studying fiction to be able to write again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that thing of escaping your influences, or you read something and it's so well done, and then you feel like you're ventriloquizing it. Uh, I once wrote a pantomime for the local Amdram group, and I'd been watching Dinner Ladies by Victoria Wood on a loop, basically. And I was writing a script, and I was just writing one of her dinner lady scenes as like 5 characters all talking at cross purposes. And I realized I was just writing Victoria Wood, but bad imitation Victoria Wood. So it is tricky. I mean, but equally, I think reading can be really helpful if you read for technique. Go, how did they do that? So the thing I always do is if I read a book and I'm swept along with it, which hopefully you are, if it's a good book and you're swept along, going, "Oh, what's going to happen next? What's happening?" And then, and this is true of a film or a TV show or anything really, is you watch it or read it once just for the story and the characters, and then immediately I will read it again, because then I don't have to worry about plot or characters because I know what's going to happen because I've just seen it or I've just read it. So therefore, then also I know what's going to happen. So therefore, I'm looking to see how stuff has been set up, how they've layered stuff in. So I go, oh, this was the clue here, and now I just breeze past that the first time. So I can then you read for technique, and then you can see, like it's like somebody's peeled away the curtain and revealed the guy behind it moving the machinery, making it all work. So I find that's a good way of going, oh, I see how they did this. Now, the problem with being a writer is that you are so embedded in storytelling and narrative. And because I teach, structure is one of the big things that I'm really strong on. It does mean I watch anything and I'm just going, here's the setup here. Oh, look. Oh, this is, oh, that they've put that. It's the old Chekhov's gun, the idea that you show something in Act 1 on the gun on the wall in Act 1. It's going to be somebody's going to fire it in Act 3 at the back of the story. So I'm constantly seeing those moments. Or you get to a point and it's 75% of the way through a film and you go, all is lost moment. To the point now in the house, we just turn to each other and go, all is lost, all is lost. Which is so completely embedded in storytelling that we're like, yeah, okay, all right. But if it's good, we'll go along and we'll enjoy it. I mean, really great storytelling. I stopped noticing the machinery, but I do find that a bit hard not to do that. But yeah, I find actually if you want to be inspired, read bad writing. Because you go, oh God, I could do better than that. Jeez Louise. Reading great writing, I find slightly discouraging because I go, I'll never be able to do that.
Yeah.
As someone who teaches structure, then we've talked quite a lot on this show about Save the Cat. And I think there when you reference the all is lost moment, how do you teach structure to students who may be tempted to grab a copy of Save the Cat and follow the beat structure because it's had a lot of commercial success?
Yeah. I mean, anything like that, Save the Cat or God, I can right out of my head. Oh, like The Writer's Journey or The Hero's Journey is the other classic one that you get, or The Virgin's Promise, which is the fairy tale version of that, which actually I think is more useful. The problem with all of those is that they're a formula, and if you use a formula, you'll end up with formulaic storytelling. Whereas I've had more success writing stories. The stories I've felt most passionate about are the ones where I've written them despite the fact I know it's breaking rules, it's not doing what it should do. It's doing things because I feel like this is what should happen next, and I'll try and sort it out and make sense of it later. But yeah, I can tell when a student has literally got the 15 beats and they're working their way through them. I go, fun and games. Oh, here we go. All is lost moment. Yep. I mean, structure can be really helpful, particularly for the big saggy middle, which is where most writers struggle. You know, people who've started writing a novel and run out of gas, they've almost always got to the end of Act 1. Almost anybody can get to the end of Act 1. It's Act 2 or 2, 3, and 4 if you're doing 5-act structure is where, you know, the sheep get sorted from the goats pretty quickly. And your ability to keep going through that big saggy bit in the middle where you're going, well, all my initial enthusiasm and impetus has left the room, and now I'm just grinding, trying to get to the big finish. Because most people will know the finish, have some sense of how it's going to finish. Because you know, if you think about the opening of any story, asks a question. You know, is a shark eating people off the coast of Amity Island, and how are we going to stop it? Well, the answer is we're going to blow it up at the end. Spoilers. But hey, it's been 48 years. I think we can get away with it now. I didn't say how they blew it up. So, you know, the start of any story asks a question, and hopefully the ending is going to answer it. So therefore, you've got Act 1, you've got your final act, but that's 3 acts or 5 acts. But it's the middle bit is where you need the help, and that's where structure can be helpful to you. But yeah, the danger of reaching for a formula book like Save the Cat is it does become very formulaic very quickly, and everybody knows.
Yeah. In a second, we're going to move on to part 3, which is community question time. We've got some staple questions to ask David, and you guys can put some questions in the chat to ask him as well. So start having a think about that. But before we move on to that part of the show, I'm really interested, David, that you've had such a vast experience of writing from, as you mentioned, plays, screenwriting, novels, and much more. Which is your favorite type of writing? and which is your worst? Chris, kill that fly. And which is your worst?
It's really irritating.
That's got Jeff Goldblum's head on it, so you know.
Yeah. So, do you have a favorite writing and a least favorite?
I've got two favorites, which is a cheat, I know, but there it is. One is comics. I love writing for comics, and because you know, it's like the movie in my head, and I turn it into. You have to condense it massively. I mean, comics as a form is about concision as much as and clarity and communication, but really, it's doing it in far less. And then you give it to an artist, and they make you look like a genius, and you're like, yeah, thank you very much. And sometimes they make you look like a schmuck, which also happens, but that's life. And then novels. Because the joy of the novel is there's almost nobody between you and the reader, so you get to go still with the fly.
It's amazing.
Leave them alone. You get to communicate directly into the imagination of the reader. So least favorite. Actually, it's probably I've written for computer games, and I've never really enjoyed the experience, particularly if you're brought in. In a lot of computer games, the writers are brought in towards the end of the process, where a lot of the work's already been done, the story's set in stone, and your job is like you're turning up. It's like the battle has been lost, the field is covered in corpses, and now you're a MASH unit. You're an ambulance driver that's turned up with a paramedic and a couple of paddles to try and bring the characters to life, and just inject characterization now, which usually just means snark. So. Yeah, I haven't really enjoyed writing for computer games the few occasions I have done it. And what was the second question?
That was it.
Okay.
It's really strange that idea about writing that as a computer writer that come in at the end. But we won't chat about that at the moment. But is there anything that you haven't written in terms of writing kind of area that you want to write in?
No, I've probably had a crack at pretty much everything at this point, for better or for worse. Yeah, I mean, I've only written the screenplay for one feature film, I think, and even that, I was talking about it with another writer the other day, and they said, "Oh, that'd make a great novel." I was like, "Yeah, I should have written that as a novel," but there we go.
Okay, right. What we're going to do is we're going to move on to part 3 of the show. We're going to ask our staple questions, and we want you guys to put some questions in the chat so we can ask David. And I'm going to play part 3. For the podcast listeners, Mr. Hooley just held up a what's it called? A fly killer?
It's Raid.
Yeah.
Well, plainly, you never grew up in a country beset by flies. If you don't know what Raid is.
Oh, I definitely know what. Yeah. I'm not sure what brand. I don't care. Anyway, part 3 of the show. Yeah, Chris has been drinking Monster and showing Raid off today, so we're doing all the brands. Part 3 of the show. Community questions coming right up. Just to make you feel a bit better, Chris Hooley, Hello says, my son killed a fly with his bare hands the other day. It was epic. Why are you not killing with your bare hands? Come on. Okay.
Just get some chopsticks. You'll be grand.
Yeah. Start us off, Chris. Staple questions for David. Let's go.
Yeah, so one of the staple questions that we've kind of been asking recently is a little bit morbid, but we're aware that the internet will probably outlive most of us. So we've been asking guests this season, if somebody in the future was to take on your back catalogue of work and all your characters, what advice would you give to them? What would you want them to do with your characters?
Oh, golly. So this is I'm Dead, and they are writing as it's David Bishop's Cesare Aldo, written by Eric Lustbader, or somebody else is filling in for me now. They can't get me anymore. I'm Dead, and Sophie Anna's too busy, so they've got somebody else to step into my shoes. Oh golly, be funny would be my advice. Don't be po-faced about it. Have fun with it. Because if you can't enjoy yourself at some point in the process of writing a novel, you're in the wrong job.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Good answer. Okay, if you could take any character from the world of fiction, whether that be in a TV show, in a film, or in a book, and adapt that character either into one of your own stories, or if you want to change it up completely, take that character out for the day, what character are you going to choose and why?
I'm going to take Batman, and I'm going to take him to Alton Towers because the guy needs
Ooh.
cheering up, frankly. I think Batman on a roller coaster would be hilarious.
Brilliant answer. And which Batman?
Ooh. Well, not Adam West. He's already got a sense of humor. Well, I think Christian Bale, frankly. That's Christian Bale Batman definitely needs to have more fun.
I agree. That's a great answer.
And another staple question that we have is, if you could change the ending to any fiction, which would it be and why?
Ooh. Golly. Well, I would like more To Kill a Mockingbird, frankly. So I would have a sequel. I mean, I know they released Go Set a Watchman, which was sort of the weird prequel, not. But I would love to have more stories with Scout and Jem and Dill. Yeah, because I just love those characters, and particularly if you watch the film version and you get to the end and I'm just in buckets on the floor at that point, they just have to bring a mop in and just squeegee me up and take me away. So I would quite happily spend more time with those characters. I love them. If they could meet Kelvin and Hobbes, that would be even better.
Brilliant. Cool. Okay, we'll get a couple of questions from the audience, and then we'll finish up with our your final question there, Chris. Halo says, "Thank you for the questions, guys. What was the most surprising fact you learned through research?"
Ooh. Well, aside from the no tomatoes thing, which freaked me out, honestly, apparently, I'm told, they thought that they did have the tomato had arrived in Italy by this point in history, but they weren't eating it yet in Florence. Apparently, when it does arrive, which is 3 years away from my characters, they think it's poisonous, and they use it to decorate their tables. So they have tomato table like as a centerpiece. Go, ooh, we've got this red thing that we think is poison, but we're going to use it on the table. So, and I just find that utterly bizarre. I think the absence of that, and the fact that there were no pews in churches, having been brought up in a family where we were dragged to church every Sunday, whether we liked it or not, the idea that everybody had to stand up for however long the service was, I think would have kept people honest.
Yeah, that's surprising.
I love the idea of somebody eating a tomato for the first time, just going, will you eat that? No, it's red. Red means danger. We can't eat red food. No, go on, give it a go.
I was somewhere about, I can't remember what it was, about 2 weeks ago, and I had something made of artichoke, and I'd never eaten artichoke in my life because I just look at it and go, that looks like a weird ass thing. And I thought, you know what? Let's be bold. People have been eating this for centuries. I'm sure it's probably edible, and it was perfectly nice. So there you go.
I mean, at what point did the argument break out? Is this a fruit and a vegetable kind of thing? Because that's always confused me a bit as well.
I mean, I'm more worried about who was the person who decided that they were going to get milk from a cow for humans, and how did they test that?
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like there's some sort of element of dubious animal husbandry going on here.
Yeah. Anna says, "Red is dead. Star Trek rules."
Yeah.
So,
don't never wear the red shirt. That's never going to end well for anybody.
Okay. Lucia, thank you for your question. Why how do you say Renaissance? I can't say
Renaissance.
Renaissance Florence. As an Italian, this makes me so proud.
Oh. Because the Renaissance was based largely, the city of Florence was the cradle for the Renaissance, and what happened is that the Renaissance is where they rediscovered the classics of architecture and art, and then brought them. Basically, it's the birth of modern society as we know it. So you get incredible artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci and Botticelli and all the other turtles, and then you get architecture, you get philosophy, you get science. So all of these things, this great blossoming of modern life, humanism as well, comes from that period in history. But it also gives us Machiavelli's The Prince, which is basically the handbook for anybody who wants to be in power, whether it's Washington or Westminster. It's how to backstab your way to the top and stay there. So I love the fact that these two things, this sort of like political backstabbing and yet great art and science and thinking and philosophy at the same time in the one place. So it had all sorts of possibilities. Also, when you go to Florence, and I think in one of your questions you mentioned, have I been? Yes, I have, to the city. But what's great about Florence is the city centre. A lot of the buildings are still there from 500 years ago. So you can walk around as if you're in 1538 or wherever the next book is set. So it's that much easier to imagine yourself into the past. Whereas if you go to London, I mean, there's feck all left of London from more than 200 years ago because of the Blitz and the Great Fire and and everything else. So there's not a lot of, early 16th century London still standing because it's all been destroyed over time.
Yeah, certainly.
David, I've got another question, just because obviously you've got that beautiful award next year. When you were nominated for that award, did you start to write a speech? And when you won the award, what was it like? And could you remember any of your speech and the excitement?
I absolutely did not write a speech because I thought that would put the curse on it. Also, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to win. So I won the historical Dagger this year for The Darkest Sin, which is the second Cesare Aldo novel. And I didn't think I had a snowball's chance in hell of winning. And I was up against some amazing books on the long list, some of which didn't make it to the short list. I was like, really? But and people who'd won more than one time before were on the long list, didn't make the short list, which was gobsmacking to me. So I deliberately didn't write a speech because I thought, let's not, and just trusted the fact if by some freakish mischance I did win, I'd be able to come up with something. And then people had started looking at me strangely and saying oddly cryptic comments when I was meeting them before in the drinks beforehand. I was going, should I be thinking of a speech? By which point it was too late. And then they announced my name, and I had a complete out-of-body experience as I was walking to the stage going, this is weird. It's like quite a long time since I've taken any drugs, but I seem to recall that's what it was like. And then the only thing I can, I think I said, I thank, the usual suspects, agent, editor, publisher, and all the rest. But I seem to recall the first thing I said when I got to the stage was bugger me, because I was suitably gobsmacked by the whole experience and was trying to keep it together. So I figured, go rude, go funny if you can manage it.
Amazing. Great. Brilliant. Okay, we've got two more questions from the audience here. We'll try and get those in, and then I know we've just gone over, but we'll be okay. Halo, one more from you. Thank you. What job would you want to do in
Renaissance?
Renaissance. Come on, Renaissance Florence. I'm assuming in that historical timeline.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a really good question. There was a lot of shit jobs. No, I think I would like to be a rich merchant. Thank you very much. And actually, better still, I'd like to be the son of a very rich merchant, but I will be the second or the third son. So I'm not in line to inherit anything, and I have no responsibilities. I'm just going to live off my family's wealth and have a good time. That's it. I'm going to be the idle, wastrel second or third son. That's my job.
I mean, at least if you're the second or third son, you're not going to get murdered in the square just yet.
Exactly, because who bothers?
Chris, would you have a job in mind?
No, but I remember watching a TikTok video, and the guy on it said that sex workers of Florence used to make pasta puttanesca for their clients. And I made the recipe, and it was amazing. So maybe if I could be involved in eating pasta somewhere, that'd be all right.
But you have to remember they don't have tomatoes yet, so you can't make puttanesca. You've got to wait another 5 years before you can have it. If you go late Renaissance, grand.
Late Renaissance, I'll go with that.
Don't eat the fish is my advice, because those rivers, nasty.
Imagine, jeez.
Crap. Okay, last one, Linda. Thank you so much, guys. You are a time traveler and go to visit two historical figure figures. You can't tell them about the future. Who do you see and what do you do? That's a great question.
Oh, that is a good question. I think I would go and visit Henry VIII because I just want to see what he's really like. You
Yeah.
know, is he a total baller or is he just a nut job? Because it could go either way, frankly.
Really good.
And then, yeah. Well, I would have to go and meet Duke Cosimo, who's the ruler of Florence in the period in my books, because I want to find out what he's really like. I'm gonna have to take an interpreter because I still can't speak Italian, even if it's 400 years in the past. But yeah, I would take a tape recorder with me and get somebody to translate it later. But yeah, I think it'd be cool to meet him.
Yeah. I mean, there would be a temptation to go forward in time, but I don't think anyone wants to see what that looks like. It's not a great thought. Okay, Chris, do you want to finish this up with a final question?
Yeah, so this question's again a little bit morbid, but you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What would you be happy with? What is success to you?
I think if I got to, well, I'm never going to get to write all the stories. I used to have a big list on my wall of all the stories I want to write, and I'm never going to get to them now. I'm far too long in the tooth. I've wasted too much time at this point. But if I could, I'd be quite happy writing Cesare Aldo novels, and I've got ideas for spin-off novels. If I could keep writing those until I drop, hopefully a good few years into the future. My family's quite long-lived, so that's helpful. 85's considered, piking out in my family. So particularly for the men. So on that basis, I'm hoping to keep writing until I'm 80. So I can get a good shelf full of books that have just got my name on them. That's cool.
You've got a big shelf of books already. But yes, fantastic. Ritual of Fire. Where can people find that? Where can they buy it? And where can they find out more information about you?
Okay, so Ritual of Fire is currently out in hardback and ebook and wonderful audiobook, an amazing audiobook reader called Mark Meadows, who's read all the books so far. So they're available on all good, online and your local indie bookshop and Waterstones and other territories. They're available as well. So yeah, that's available everywhere. I'm currently working on book 4, which will be out in June next year, and the paperback of Ritual of Fire is out in mid-February next year. And where they find out more about me, my website is nice and simple. It's dvbishop.com, dvbishop.com, and that's the quickest way to find me.
Amazing. Yeah, the links to the book and the website are in the description of the podcast and the YouTube video. And do get the hardback cover because it is an incredible cover. It really stands out well. As presented in the top corner of the screen and in Mr. Bishop's hands right now.
With lovely gold foil, and it's really nice.
It's very, very nice. And if you can support your local bookshops, do that. But if you can't, use the link in the description. But all I can say is thank you so much, David. You've been a fantastic guest with a lot of information for us. So thank you. I hope you've had a great time.
It's been brilliant. And I encourage everybody, tomorrow, I believe, is National Bookshop Day. So get along to your local bookshop.
There you go. And pick up the Ritual of Fire at your bookshop. Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, we'll be back next week. And look out for our Halloween show. If you're interested in the panel show, get in touch. But from us, David, Chris Hooley, and Chris Me, thank you so much for tuning in, watching this back, listening back. It's all appreciated. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic weekend. From us, it's goodbye.
Bye.